everyone, and welcome back to Aesthetic Chat with Kiki. I'm your host, Kiana Gamble, and this is Season 4. I'm excited to have Savannah and Brennan on today to chat all things Nurse Practitioner School. So, enjoy. Well, welcome back to the podcast, Savannah. First, I wanted to congratulate you on graduating. That's super exciting.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be done. I still have to take boards, but I'm happy to be done.
So first, just reintroduce yourself and then kind of walk us through what school you attended.
Perfect. I am Savannah. Like you said, I'm a nurse injector here in Minnesota. I just graduated with my FNP through Walden University.
Okay. And then were you a full-time student or a part-time student?
I was a full-time student. Technically, they were condensed classes. So they were 11 weeks and then some were, I think, not 8 to 9 weeks. So they were a little bit more fast-paced and I worked through summer, but full-time was considered 2 classes.
Oh, okay. It sounds way better than my program. Tell me a little bit about the course load and the time commitment, especially if they were, 12 weeks or sometimes condensed to like 8 or 9 weeks.
Yeah, so the condensed ones definitely were more work because you had more assignments due throughout the weeks at like one time. But overall, I felt like the coursework and the course load was manageable with working at least part-time. I definitely struggled when I hit the clinical portion. The clinical portion was really, really tricky. I did have to take a lot of time off, and finding my own clinicals was not ideal because I had to actually go out of state for one of them because I couldn't find a pediatric rotation. So that was interesting, but overall, I felt like I was probably working about 20 to 30-ish hours a week on like reading, coursework, all of the stuff to do with school. And then when clinicals came about, that was a whole nother story.
How long was your program? And then at what point in the program did you start the clinicals?
So I started clinicals a year from graduation because there was 4 11-week courses with a 2-week break in between that were all clinical courses. So I had 4 clinical rotations. And my whole program, I went from a BSN to MSN program. So it actually was condensed as both. So I think it was about 2-ish years, give or take.
Okay. So with working, you said you worked part-time-ish. At some points, especially once clinicals hit, were you working maybe not at all that week? Or how many days per week in clinic were you working?
Yeah, so once I hit my clinicals, I honestly would recommend anyone taking off as much time as possible because what a lot of schools don't tell you is you have your clinicals all day, but then you also have an after, like you have to enter all your patients, you have to record what you did, and there's like a whole chart note that you have to do on all the patients that you see, which I had a specific requirement through each class for the amount of patients I had to see. So once I hit clinicals, I took off as much time as possible. There was some weeks where I wouldn't work at all. There was some weeks where I'd pick up a day or two. And my second to last rotation was actually in Iowa. I had to go out of state. And then I wasn't working. I was working off weeks. So like I'd go to Iowa for a week and then I'd come home and work for a week. And it was kind of back and forth. But I would recommend anyone taking off that time if they can because the clinical load is ridiculous.
Being injectors, I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like for me, I'm always very concerned about my patients and I would do anything to try to get them in. How is that trying to manage, yourself and your course load, but also like not hanging your patients out to dry? Did you end up having to push them to other providers?
That's a really good question. And that's a very fair question because that's the same question I asked my mom right as I was getting into my clinicals. I was like, I'm going to lose all my patients because I'm going to have no time to see them. And I will say that I would cross-refer to anyone that I worked with or an injector that I knew that could do a good job and just say, hey, like if I can't see you, like I'll try to make it work, but if not, go to their schedule. And I will say I only lost a good handful of patients, but I'm trying to have the mentality that if they don't come back, they weren't meant to be mine. And I couldn't show up for my patients the way that they deserved me to show up. I really was not with it and in their treatments like I should have been as a nurse. So I knew that it was a good thing for me to do because I just wasn't focused. And I was at the point where I was like so overwhelmed that I'm like, I just don't care, which is the last thing you want from your nurse injector to say. So for all of those patients that I couldn't get in, I was just like, see someone else. I'll be back in 3 months and then we can restart from there.
Thank you for being so honest with that because I think when you have so much going on, it's hard to be present in the moment, especially when you're like, well, I have this to do and this to do and this is coming up or this quiz or whatever it is. And so you're right. Like you don't want someone injecting your face when they're like half in the door and half out the door. So I think that that's great advice for the people that are like kind of walking into the path that you just got through. Following along with your Instagram, I definitely saw you like flying all these different places, and I did not realize they were for clinical. Kind of talk a little bit about that. It sounds like the pediatric rotation was very hard to find. How did you even get connected with someone like out of state?
That actually was a blessing all in itself, because I had reached out to about 60 to 70 clinics locally within like a 2-hour span. And I was looking into Wisconsin, I was looking into Iowa, and I actually applied to both boards because I had to get licensure in both states. If you're applying out of state, just apply for the license because it takes a while to get that multi-state license. But I was flying quite a bit to Iowa, and then I was driving to all these other places as the clinicals came about. I would say that overall, it was honestly nicer to fly to a spot because I didn't have the distractions of being home. So I actually felt like even though it was really, really hard for me to go to clinicals and then come back and work, I felt like I was stronger paying attention in clinicals when I showed up for the week. And that was like my week to focus on clinicals versus here where it was like every Wednesday we're going or every Thursday we're going.
Gotcha. What were your hour requirements for clinicals? Did it change per rotation, or like, do you remember roughly the amount?
I honestly don't remember the amount. I know I had to see 160 patients per semester or per class, 4 weeks in Iowa, 4 weeks all day, like 10-hour days. So it was a hefty amount of hours.
So is it like Monday through Friday, 10-hour days?
Yep, Monday through Friday, 10-hour days. And I totally forgot to answer how I got connected with someone in Iowa. I actually found a lady who's a nurse injector who works in Iowa, and I was posting on Instagram saying, hey, like I need a pediatric rotation. Does anyone have one? And she actually reached out and said that she knew someone that took NP students because post-COVID, it's really hard. So find your clinicals in advance. People tell you that, but like I did a year in advance and I still was up to the day before to submit my pediatric one.
Oh gosh, that sounds so stressful.
It really was. A lot of applying to like different states' licensures and all of that. I was like, my head's going to explode.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's honestly a big reason why I am doing a primary gero program, just because I don't have to find that pediatric rotation. But at least where I am, the biggest struggle with finding rotations around here is that there are other like nurse practitioner schools that have precedence over like the big hospitals. Is that kind of the same where you are? Is that why you struggled so much?
Yeah, that's why I struggled so much. And a lot of times they had wait lists after COVID of like, okay, we have our next semester open is in January 2025. And I'm like, well, I don't want to wait that long. So it was like they had a wait list. And then we do have a lot of great nursing schools up here in Minnesota that partner with the big hospitals. And that really limited the clinics that would work with me.
Yeah, I feel like if they have a big affiliation with one of the bigger, state schools, it's an absolute no. They're like, yep, we don't have time for you. Go somewhere else. So would you say that was your biggest challenge with nurse practitioner school, was trying to find those clinicals?
Yeah, I would say that. And then I honestly would say trying to juggle a personal life and just be focused on school. I feel like we all go about our day, we work, we go home, but it's like then when you go home, you have to still be on. And as nurse injectors, we're on all day with our patients every single day. And then you come home, I just want to sit and like veg for like an hour before I even talk to anyone. But then you have to get on and you have to do so much homework. So I felt like I struggled being present in any area of my life just because there was so many big things that I had to give a lot of attention to.
Do you feel like with school and within these last like 2.5 years, did you feel like you found enough time to be social? Did you have enough of a break? Like, I guess, how did you try to be present and try to be as social as possible to kind of get some type of relief during all this?
I tried my best. I traveled with some of my friends that were like taking trips, and I would work ahead on homework. And then on the 2-week breaks that I had, I would try to pack in as much social stuff as I could because I'm like, I don't have any other time to hang out. And after work and like being in clinic all day, I was like, I don't want to go out to dinner or do anything. So I would focus on my 2-week break and just tell people like, I'm not going to be a good friend this like semester until my 2-week break. So that's what I tried to do.
Nice. So my question for you is, right after you graduated or kind of like coming up to graduation, how did you spend some of that downtime now that you have a lot more downtime than you have had in the last 2.5 years?
Good question. Honestly, I feel like for me, I always try to stay busy. I always joke that I thrive on chaos. That's why I'm just like go, go, go all the time. So I took 2 weeks off after I graduated just to veg and not study, not do anything, just kind of reorganize my house, clean, do all the things that kind of got pushed to the end of the to-do list as I was in school. So I was excited about that. And then I ended up going to Sweden in November as like my graduation present to like myself and just to explore a different part of the world because I feel like I wasn't able to be present for that 2 years that I was in school.
Oh, so fun. So would you recommend the program that you did to someone looking into schools? If so, why? If not, why not?
You know, it kind of goes both ways. If you are doing an online program, I feel like there's always the piece of it that you're going to be teaching yourself. You have to be self-motivated. You have to stay on top of your deadlines. Like the teachers aren't going to do all of that for you like they did in nursing school. So I would say if you're self-motivated, I would recommend it because I liked the fast-paced option. That was the reason why I did it. Were the teachers really great and was my advisor great? Not necessarily. They helped, but I would say a lot of it was on me. But it got me through quick. I do feel prepared for the test. I did learn a lot. But overall, I would say that if you really do struggle with like staying focused or that motivation, I wouldn't recommend it for that.
Okay, good to know. Did your mom go through the exact same program as well?
She did. And that's why I chose that school because I'm like, you know what? You went through it. You know how it is. You'll be able to help me if I have any questions. She did the adult Gero though versus FNP.
Looking back, honestly, I wish I would have just gotten my MSN. Being online, did you feel like you had made any type of connections with other students in your classes? Did you see familiar faces? Like, did you build some type of network to kind of help you out, or did you kind of feel like you were all on your own?
I definitely felt like I was all on my own. We had a couple group projects, but it all depends on who's in your group. I feel like most of the time you have that one that's like the type A person, and that's me. But overall, there was a couple people that I saw consistently in like class to class with me, like their names on the screen, but I did not build any like relationships or friendships or anything like that getting out of school.
I think that's just the nature of remote and online, but that would be like the same boat for me as well. At least in my courses, every course starts with like an introduction section or like a get to know you or some type of discussion post. And having to do yours and having to review other students, did you ever come across any other, people in the aesthetic field?
I did. There was one other injector there or in one of my classes, and she was in for about 2 or 3, and then I think she might have switched to AGNP because then she fell off as I got to the pediatric stuff. So other than that, I was really the only person that was in the aesthetic realm. The lady that actually connected me to my pediatric rotation clinical, she was an injector, and she also worked for Walden at the time. So that was the beautiful thing about her, is she was able to kind of help me find that pediatric clinical. But other than that, there was only about those 2 injectors that I ran into.
Okay. Did you feel in your classes at all, with everyone else like still working either bedside or in a clinic that's not aesthetics, did you feel like that was a disadvantage for you, or did you feel like you brought a different perspective to the program?
That's another good question. I felt like I was able to bring a different perspective because for me, I knew that I wasn't going to NP school like most people to be an NP working in that field. I wanted to have it to propel my aesthetic career forward and just not limit the autonomy down the road, depending on how the laws are changing now. And so for me, I'm like, I might not have these skills, but I can relearn, get them fresh. Will I ever use them? No. And that was kind of my comfort, where I was like, you know what? I know that I'm not going to use this in practice, but I want to learn. So all of my clinical sites were very understanding with that. And I told them straight up, I was like, I am rusty. I was a COVID nursing student, and then throw in being online like NP student. So I'm like, my hands-on skills are very minimal compared to probably most people coming out of nursing school.
Do you feel like with the faculty that you encountered and, other students, did you feel like there was any type of like stigma interacting with them when they were like, oh, you're like doing aesthetics?
Honestly, no, which surprised me. I thought that I would, because in nursing school, way back when now, feels like a lifetime ago, there was so much stigma around it. But once I hit NP, because we didn't really talk about what we did, except for the intro section, it really wasn't brought up. And then in clinicals, more people had questions, like actually at like expressing interest rather than being like, oh, like you're not a real nurse. Like I heard in nursing school time and time again.
Even in like some of the coursework that they had you do, would a prompt say, in your experience or in your own words, can you describe X? I have felt most of the students are like, I want to do what you're doing. And most of the faculty, like they do not know what to do with me. So most of my prompts and everything that I do, I feel like I have to tap back into all of my hospital experience and really write about that versus trying to apply it to my life now.
No, for sure. And that's what I did struggle with some of the papers. And I did reach out to my teachers and I was like, I'm going to be pulling from like my nursing school clinicals. But just so you know, like I also did simulation lab because when COVID hit, we weren't allowed to go in with nursing school. So I used a lot of like cases. My teachers would also work with me and send me cases if I would write it and they were like, this isn't what we're looking for. They would let me redo it like maybe 1 or 2 times. I had that happen earlier in the semester. As I got more in the clinical rotations, I was able to pick up and embellish where I needed to with things that I might not have had hands-on with. But I was always open and honest with my teachers. If they were like, hey, this is not right, I'll be like, well, that's all I know. So
Gotcha. So if you can think back, what other schools had you applied to, if you applied to any, or did you really just apply to this one school?
I'm so type A to the point where I was like, even though I already have a bachelor's, I want my bachelor's of nursing just as like behind my name, the letters. I don't know why, but I went for my bachelor's first. And then once you had your bachelor's, they gave you a discount on the MSN program on the MSN classes. So I was able to kind of merge them as an accelerated program and take some of the master's classes in my BSN and have it count for both. So I just applied for that. And then I just worked straight through.
Oh, nice. The fact that you just wanted to go back and get that just to say you had it. Do you think you'll go back at all for your DNP or your PhD, or do you think you're done with school?
I think I'm done with school. I think that the aesthetic world and what I want to do with it, I don't need any other further education. And I feel like it was so hard to focus on injectables at all during school because my brain was so filled with other information that I feel like my skills on injecting didn't grow. So I'm excited to now focus on my injecting training, going to more conferences this year, and all of those things that I feel like I missed out on and saw my colleagues grow. And I'm like, well, I still don't know how to do this. And I felt so behind in that world that I'm excited to just kind of give it that focus again.
I totally agree with you and can completely relate. Like I try to stay up to date on what I can with journals.
It is. And I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, well, it's an online program or a hybrid program and it's not that much work, but they really do give you a lot of work in your master's program. And then throw on top that it's not just any master's program, it's a healthcare master's program. So it's a lot of stress and it's a lot of heavy work and it's a lot of things on the line because you're dealing with people's lives. So I agree with you. I did not read one article for like 2 years, I think. So I'm excited to have some time to do all that again.
Do you feel like with everything that you went through in the last 2.5 years, do you feel like it was worth it or would you change anything?
That is a really good question. If I could go back, I would take more time off work. I think that if I had the opportunity to, which I did, I was living with my parents at the time because when COVID hit, we had moved out of our apartment. So I was like, you know what? I wish that I would have taken more time off and just been able to focus because I feel like I was so focused on all these different things that I let a lot slide through the crack, such as like staying on top of it with like my patient texts and all of the things that I used to do that, or even things like self-care. So I would go back and take more time off work to really focus in on it. But overall, I'm happy with the program. I'm happy I'm done. Would I do it again? No. Like if I was just now starting, I'd be like, heck no. But I'm happy now that it's done.
Did the program encourage you all to not work?
They did. They did encourage us to not work, especially when clinicals hit. They said when clinicals hit, that's a whole nother ball game. And they were right, honestly. My mom worked through it. So I was like, oh, perfect. If she can do it, I can do it. But you don't realize until you're going through it how much work it's actually going to be. And it's a lot of work when clinicals hit.
With all that you know now, would you recommend other RN injectors go down the same path you did in the same way that you did?
I think it depends on what you want from the degree. I do think that the laws are changing. I just saw a post a little bit ago about one of the I think it's North or South Carolina, one of those where they're trying to pass where nurses can't inject filler at all. Like 2-year nurses can't at all. And so I do know that there's some states that are getting a little more strict with their laws. So I think that if you want to make this a career and you don't want any limitations around what you can or can't do down the road, I would definitely look into NP school, as that's going to become the new standard, I think.
I agree with you. I think it's going to take some time, but I think that we're going to be right in the crosshairs in the next, 20 years. We're not going to be in the spot where we're going to be retiring. So
like you, I'm like, I don't want to risk it. I'll go back now when I'm young. My brain is still with it. I don't have children yet. It's just easier.
Yeah, I'm a dog mom and I don't have any kids, and it's enough for me going through all of this. I can't imagine being like the other students in my cohort that have kids and are, working the same amount that I am and have all these other responsibilities. I only took 2 years between my bachelor's and now, and I couldn't imagine taking off any more time, let alone waiting, 5+ years.
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine. I honestly, that's why I worked straight through, because I'm like, I know that if I take too big of a break, I won't go back, because everything changes so quickly with school. And then in medicine, there's specific ways you have to write papers and all of that. So you kind of feel like you're relearning not only that, but then the school's program, and then all the new stuff that came about with all the science that's changed. So it's a lot to adjust to.
Definitely. So what would your advice be to someone that maybe just got accepted into nurse practitioner school and they either just started or starting sometime in 2024? What is your biggest advice to them?
Honestly, be patient with yourself, be kind to yourself, and just know that who you are during school isn't who you're going to be after school. I remember my mom telling me that. She's like, you're just going to be a different person when you're in school. And I was like, no, I won't. It'll be fine. But you really do become a different person. And you don't like the version of yourself. At least I didn't. I was like, I was crabby a lot. I wasn't giving time to things that fed my soul. But it's one of those things that it's temporary, and take it a day at a time, an assignment at a time, a class at a time, and you'll get through it before you know it. Even though the light seems very dim at the end of the tunnel, it's there.
Great advice. And then I do want to end on this note. So I want you to share one or a few of your 2024 goals. You did mention that you want to get back into, conferences and aesthetic trainings, but what are some of your, career goals going forward?
Some of my career goals going forward, and honestly, I hadn't put much thought into them until literally 2 days ago, because I feel like, again, I've been running around with my head cut off with the holiday season, as you know, as an injector. It's a busy time of year. But I think for me, my biggest goals for my career are just to be able to be present again with each patient and really ask them the questions, that even personal questions, and stay up to date, because for so long I was so good about how are your kids? How's your mom? Asking those personal questions to get to know them more. But then during school, I was like, all right, get in. Let's do this a treatment. And I just wasn't myself. So I think finding myself as a provider, again, I'm really excited to do. And then honestly, more trainings, more conferences. I want to keep building my social media and just kind of focus on that and education and educating patients. Because I feel like this field, there's so much negativity around it that I feel like the people that have a positive impact should educate as much as they can, like you're doing with this podcast, like we do with our social media, to show that it can look good naturally versus some of the things way back when and some of the patients way back when that weren't ideally done.
Is there any other advice that you would have for any injector considering going back to school, or again, an injector in the middle of their program that's like, I don't know if it's worth it. I want to quit. What would you say to them?
Honestly, there was one point that I almost quit. There was one point that I can vividly remember that I'm like, I'm just done. I'm like, I'm tapped out. I don't know who I am. I felt so lost. I felt like I was watching everyone's lives on social media just be so fun and exciting. And for me, I felt so behind. Even though I was propelling forward, I felt behind. So I think that my best thought about that would just be don't quit. If you have to just take some time and maybe limit it to not full-time, go part-time, do one class at a time, take off work, do whatever you have to do. But if you made it into NP school, there's a reason why you made it into NP school. So I would say just slow down if you feel overwhelmed and try to lighten your load in every other area. Don't make plans with people, because I was a yes person and that quickly came to bite me because I was just more overwhelmed. So just take time for you and prioritize what's important to you and what you need to get done. Otherwise, you're going to feel like you're so overwhelmed and so overworked that you can't even function in your day-to-day life.
Great advice. I think that that will help people. I think that I've had a handful of people reach out and they're like, I don't know if I can do it anymore. And I'm like, I don't think I'm the person to tell you this because I'm in the same boat. But I'm like, I'm not quitting, so I don't think you should quit either.
Yeah. Honestly, that's where I was at. I'm like, I've already invested so much to get to this point. And that it was during clinicals that I felt that way because there's just so much going on and there's so many moving pieces. And then you're trying to apply for the graduation and boards. And there's so many other things that you're trying to do along with keeping up with patients. So I would say don't quit, just lower that schedule as much as possible and lower your commitments where you can.
And then last but not least, what exam are you taking? Because there's a few different exams that FNPs can kind of take.
So I think I'm going to try the FNP BC, the board certified one, and then I'm going to actually register for both and see which one I can get into first. There's the FNP BC and then I think just the FNP. So I'll probably try to register for both and then probably try to sit for both as well, just to see which one I pass.
Are you going to be doing like a prep course of any kind, or how much time are you going to allot to studying for boards?
I want to register for boards. So for me, I'm with that type of person that I'm like, if it's not on my schedule, I won't work towards it. So I've been studying here and there, but I haven't sat down to really be like, okay, what's my study plan? Once I register for boards, then I'll create a study plan, but I'm hoping that I can have about a month and a half to 2 months to study and go through a couple courses.
I'm the same as you. I'm like, I would rather get it done like as soon as possible because otherwise it's like all just going to leave my brain.
Yes, what we do for work, I'm like, we're not in it every day. So I already feel like I don't know as much as I should. But you know what? If we fail, we can retake it and I'll always do another prep course. So I'm just kind of going in that mindset of it's not affecting my role as a nurse injector now. So if it takes me a little bit longer, that's okay. At least the schooling's done, but the board certification will come in no time. I just have to dedicate the time to figure out how to do it.
And having your certification, does that change at all your day-to-day? I know it said it doesn't change now, but in what way will that change?
So once I'm an NP, I will gain autonomy after a year of working under a doctor. So I have to work under a doctor, at least that's Minnesota's law, for a year post passing boards. And then I can write prescriptions, which will be great for my patients that have cold sores or need other types of medications for something around their aesthetic treatment. And then down the road, my goal would be to eventually own my own clinic or have my own place without needing a medical director.
Gotcha. I know the states are also different. So I'm like, so what does it look like in Minnesota? Because not all states need, the same type of supervision. Well, I wish you luck on your boards. Tell everyone where they can find you on social media if they have any questions.
Yes, please reach out if you have any questions. I'm terrible at answering my DMs, but I do try to go through them frequently. But my social media handle on Instagram is Savannah, SAVANNAH _Brennan, BRENNAN.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Savannah, for coming on the podcast. All right, beauties. And that was a wrap on this episode. Thank you again, Savannah, for coming on the podcast. Again, I'm really glad that you were able to give us all of your advice on your program. So, beauties, if you have any questions, want to reach out, our Instagram is @aesthetic.chatwithkiki. My Instagram is @aestheticnurse.kiki. You can find the podcast on all the streaming platforms, including YouTube, and the website is aestheticnursekiki.com. But until next time, beauties, bye.